Hey there everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 in the series where we're talking about leveling up your log, all about positioning. And today we're going to be discussing at length the clean phase of the log. But just as a quick overview, when it comes to the log clean and press, there's a few key positions or steps we want to look at. That's the pick and lap phase, which we discussed in the first video. And then next would be the clean and rack phase. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to separate the clean and rack phase because the rack itself is more inherently linked to your dip drive, which is going to help with your press or jerk at the very end of it. Regardless, you can separate it, but this just gives you an idea of what we're discussing, which again, we're really emphasizing the clean in today's video. Now, as far as the clean itself with the log goes, there's really two main ways of looking at it. There's the traditional squat clean where you're going to pick it up, set it in your lap, and then roll it up your body. And then more of a power clean where you're going to bypass the lap phase and go directly from ground to the rack position. I'm also going to touch briefly on the Viper press or log 1 motion, as this isn't quite a pressing movement, but I felt like it was worth discussing, and that's what we're going to talk about it in the clean video today. And for what it's worth, you can look at the Viper press as also having two iterations. There is the lap to 1 motion, which we're going to call a squat Viper, or the true 1 motion where you go ground to overhead, and we're going to call that the power Viper. So first up, let's take a look at the traditional squat clean with the log. So you can see here in all these videos, they're not perfectly synced, but we're picking it up and we're getting a good lap position, relatively vertical torso. Again, we're just demoing what this technique looks like overall. Now, as far as the clean itself, your big points of performance here is this one is going to allow for the most loading on the log. That's why it's pretty much synonymous with maximal loads, especially at world record levels. Additionally, when you are extending your hips, you want to think your hips are both going upwards and into the log, sort of like you're pulling up your pants. I find that really helps. If you are using a belt on this iteration, you want to think that the log is going to be at or slightly above your belt in the lap position, and you should also consider spinning the buckle around so it's on the back so it doesn't gouge into the log or mess up your clean phase. The lap is so very important when it comes to your log clean, which is why we have a whole video discussing your lap position and how to improve it for the log. Stretch reflex is your friend here. You want to come up, get it in your lap, and don't spend too much time at the bottom. Get it strong, get it stable, but you shouldn't spend all day there. Your hips, knees, and ankles all need to extend. So that's also a good little ding against my video there, because if you noticed, my ankles did not extend because the log wasn't heavy enough to mandate it, but nevertheless, we want to think about that, which also segues into the next style of clean when we're talking about triple extension, which is the power clean, like so. So you'll notice here, again, we are bypassing the lap phase, and you'll see I get that triple extension. I am coming up onto my toes to generate more power. Even in a squat clean, you do want to see this. Now, as far as the power clean itself, it's generally faster than a squat clean, but in general, you're also not going to be able to handle as much load. It's a very explosive variation. Honestly, if you are working log, a good trick is to do your first couple warm-up sets with a power clean before moving into a squat clean. Helps prime the nervous system. You can almost think of it like microdosing plyometrics. That's always a good approach. Now, the power itself is going to come from the hips. This is not a curl. You want to keep the arms straight until you start applying hip drive. Generally, this iteration is going to be a little easier on the legs and back versus the squat clean version. So this is really nice if you are pushing your deads, for example. You can use this iteration instead. Again, you need that triple extension, hip, knees, and ankles. And then lastly, as it comes up, you're not trying to squat back underneath it like you would with a barbell clean, but instead you want to let it roll into place. Now, speaking of the log being in place, this kind of leads into the rack position, which we're not going to talk about too much right now, but I did want to introduce this concept. Because you'll see here we have 3 different examples of how the log will sit. For example, there's horizontal handles, angled handles, and steeply angled handles. And in general, when you power clean, you'll usually wind up with a closer to flat handle, and a flatter handle position correlates better to something like a strict press, whereas the more angular handles, what those are going to do is they help you keep the log up on your chest, so when you apply leg drive, like in a push press or a jerk, the log isn't going to come forward. Now that said, as you get stronger at power cleans, you may be able to get the higher handle position as well. This is just something worth considering depending on whether you are training strict log or log with leg drive. I personally, if I'm training strict log, I will only power clean it for that exact reason. Now, worth mentioning is the Viper press, as I talked about earlier. That's that log one motion where you are going to bypass the rack position and go straight into the press. And again, you have two iterations of the Viper press. There is the squat Viper where you go from lap to overhead, and then there is more of the true one motion or power Viper where you go from ground to overhead all in one motion, so there's neither a lap nor a rack phase. So first up here is a squat Viper. So you can see we have the pick, upright lap position, hips go up and into the log, head goes back, and we are bypassing the rack position. And then next up is going to be the power Viper, where we're going directly from ground to overhead in one take, quite literally. So a lot of folks, when they think one motion, this would be a more true one motion, but regardless of which iteration you're looking for, there's a couple things worth considering. In both variations of the Viper press, the power is going to come from your hips, and then it is finished with the triceps. Both Vipers are going to generally be faster than a true clean and press. However, you're also going to generally expend a bit more energy per repetition, so that's something to keep in mind. So regardless of what style of clean or Viper you opt for, these are the universal facts. The power primarily comes from the hips and glutes. Let the log roll into place rather than trying to squat underneath it. The log doesn't have the whippy ends like an Olympic lifting barbell, so you're not going to have that same margin for error. If you are lapping the log, you want the log at roughly belt height, and you need to keep that log in as close as possible. Now, as I said before, in the next video, we're going to talk more about rack position as well as dip drive mechanics. This is one that really requires us to slow down and focus in on it, because we're going to discuss common faults in the technique, as well as assistance and accessory movements to help improve your position with this particular spot on the log lift. The clean's a pretty quick lift, so this has been a pretty quick video. I just wanted to discuss the two main styles of clean you're going to see with the log, as well as the two iterations of the Viper press, and sort of understanding application for each of them. In the next one, we're really going to slow down and dial in to discuss the rack position, as well as accessory movements and variations you can use to help get stronger there. Make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrubio. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. But with that being said, that's all I got for you. I'll see you next time.